Hi, this is Lynn Fraser, and I'm here today with Sah D'Simone, who I first learned about on a podcast with Tammy Simon in Sounds True. And Sah, I just loved your approach and your joy, but also your really deep meditation. And so I thought today we could talk about addiction and recovery, but also, the spiritual bypassing that goes on, the kind of the stuffed shirt kind of atmosphere.
Oh yeah.
And so why don't you just kind of take it from there and just let's just start.
Okay. Well, I mean that podcast was incredible. I love Tammy and just so honored to be published with Sounds True. And the book is called Spiritually Sassy. Yeah, and my journey with like drugs and alcohol started really young. I smoked crack when I was 14 and then got really heavy into, cocaine, ecstasy, all kinds of different, things. When I was 19, from 19 to 21, it was pretty heavy because I was living out in LA and I was just coming about. I was just like meeting my queerness. And the only way for me to feel relaxed around my queerness was to be intoxicated.
Right.
And of course, you look back at when I was like, 14. What was this little boy, this darling little boy? Why was this desperate need to be high on such a heavy drug? Again, my inability to be okay with who I truly am, and the roles that I had to play to receive love and to survive, really, how many different roles I had to play. I had to be one person at home. I had to be somebody else in school. I had to be somebody else around my friends, and this kind of like disembodied and fragmented way of living just created so much dis-ease in my body, and what I like to say is crunchy in the mind. This complete split attention, and the only way for me to like touch base with the present moment, sadly, was when I was like high, when I felt relaxed in the here and the now, and I think a lot of people ended up using drugs and alcohol for that reason, to just like be able to meet the present moment a little bit, although you're intoxicated, induced, and there is a very big consequence to pay for that intoxication.
Yeah.
But you are meeting yourself at a more relaxed state. So that's kind of like, I feel like a big reason why we get into that. And not having community, right? Not having people that I could talk to about my queerness and people who would celebrate my queerness. So then it was a season in my early 20s. And then I got into the fashion, and then I moved to New York, got into the fashion industry. And then that's when the kind of heaviness around kind of became more normalized, because everybody else was drunk and high at the same time and just kind of going through the motions of life. And I was like a really high performer, although I was smoking pot 3-4 times a day and I was drinking every night. But it's normal. It's part of the culture. And then I just kind of kept going until the fall of 2012. I was about to turn 28, and then I decided that it was time for me to leave. And then, a variety of circumstances took place, and I then was bought out of the company that I had started when I was 23. So the betrayal of that, all the hardship of that, sort of erupted another wave of addiction, and another wave of suicidal depression, another wave of really, really anxious states of mind. And with that eruption, there was it was like the catalyst for me to want to do something different, to not feel bad all the time and not be seeking out these quick fixes for my internal discomfort. So it was a catalyst for me to then want to seek out help and support. But I didn't actually seek out help, going to see a therapist or going to see somebody that could, help me get out of that hole. I just started researching. And the research led me to take small steps towards my healing journey. And that's when I started to slowly not smoke as much, not drink as much, and started meditating and just getting the really like, ooh, this feels nice, and exercising and dancing and eating differently and taking care of my gut, really taking care of my body. and my mind in a whole new way. And then slowly, I then decided that I wanted to go study with these masters who have put forth this contingency plan for freedom, these steps that would technically set you free. So that's when I went to India. It was the spring of 2014, and then I did a 10-day silent retreat. And during that retreat, we were doing a meditation on death. Mm-hmm. And those 3 days of meeting death, using our imagination to visualize our own death process, it was so jarring. It was so moving, and it really just woke me up to like priorities. Woke me up to like, what kind of life do I want to live? What kind of person do I want to be? Do I want to be completely intoxicated with these quick fixes like drugs and alcohol, or do I want to find a way out? And through a variety of practices, I started to feel a little bit better. It was a slow process. And then after I did this 10-day silent retreat, I went to do a 30-day silent retreat, and now we're in Nepal. And it was at that retreat that I heard such profound words that we have innate goodness, that we are innately benevolent. And for someone who grows up in the West with this queer narrative that like you being queer is a mortal sin, or the only way for you to be okay with your queerness, for me, was to be intoxicated. So that kind of an mortal sin, and and the shame narrative that comes with it, it's like you're innately a bad person. So to touch base with my innate benevolence and my innate goodness, it was incredibly mind-blowing. You know what I mean? It's just like, wow, my past does not define who I am. What defines who I am is my relationship to my past. If I could relate to it with a little bit of sweetness and tenderness and kindness and compassion and joy, then that's who I am. That's who I will become more of. And then it was at that retreat that I decided to take a vow to just change. I said, if I commit to these vows, and I know in the West we're sort of like soft vows, whatever, but the truth of it, they're just promises to yourself. Yes, I'm making these promises to a guru, but it's really, the guru is within. It's a reflection of what lives within us.
Yeah.
So I made these vows, and then I said, if my life changes after a year of me being committed to this, I will then keep going,
Right.
Yeah. And then there was a time but I still didn't commit to being fully sober though. It was like, oh, now I can drink once every couple of weeks. Now I can get high once every few weeks. Like I'm not as craving around it anymore, because I found ways of coping and healing my internal chaos with healthy practices, with sustainable practices. But then it was summer of 2017. I had these 2 really big teaching opportunities. That week, I was going to be speaking in front of a crowd of over 500 people. And then I talked to one of my teachers. My teacher said, Sah, if you put forth, and this might sound a little mystical for some, but just hear me out. You don't need to drink the Kool-Aid. Just hear me out on this. If you're going to give guidance to this amount of people, and the guidance doesn't come from a place that's completely untinted, that's not polluted, that's not, even the smallest little residue of having had alcohol a couple of days ago, if your direction is not fully Jedi focused and clear, you're going to whatever unwholesome karma, whatever unwholesome action that these people do based on your direction, it's going to be your fault. Therefore, it's going to impact it's going to impact your life. It's going to pivot your karma in a variety of different ways. So I said, you know what? I'm going to become completely sober, and I'm going to see what happens. So now, it's November of 2020. I am 3 years and 6 months sober. And it's been the best decision of my life. You gave me a short question. Now it's a long answer, but there it is. This is kind of the journey, a little bit.
Wow. So there's a few things I'd like to kind of circle back to in that. Quite a few, actually. So one is that sweet 14-year-old boy that just breaks our heart, when we see how disconnected and lost people are. And especially when I don't know what your family was like, if you were welcome as a young queer man in your family. I certainly wasn't in mine. And when
No.
I came out in the 1970s, the only place to find other queer people was in the bars. And I don't know if that's changed now or not, but that was it.
Oh my God, I have full body chills as you're saying this. Wow.
Mm.
Oh my God, yes. Oh my God. And honestly, the truth of it, my parents are very loving, beautiful, beautiful humans. And they just could not accept anything that wasn't, what for them was the norm. I had
Right.
two, a brother, older sister, and a younger brother. They're both straight. So they were asking me to have a girlfriend. They were asking me about my girlfriend. They were asking me like how, like what's and underneath that question is what's wrong with you.
Exactly.
So we internalize that what's wrong with me as like maybe I am innately broken, maybe I am innately bad. And I've had many times in my childhood that I was like begging whatever was out there listening, sobbing in the shower, begging for whatever was out there listening to make me normal. And
Mm.
now this vibrancy and this like wildness, that the spiritually sassiness that I bring out forth is what really is connecting people, and it's what really sets me free, being like so radically myself that it gives
Yeah.
everybody else permission to be themselves too.
Yes, it does. Yeah. And I think, the one of the first things that I heard when I started meditating, it's almost 30 years ago now, was about basic goodness. And it was the same, I had the same response. I'm like, wow, like I just couldn't believe that that would be true for anybody. And, through a series of connections with teachers and different people from the East, that is true. That's what they believe. And that's what we come to know through our practice.
Mhm,
And that is such a transformation for
mhm,
people, that we could know that we could know that we're not broken,
mhm,
and that we could know that we're basically good.
mhm. And holding that view for all people, holding that view
Yeah.
for people in death row, holding that view for the most challenging people, holding that view for people in the slums of Kolkata, in the largest refugee camp in South Sudan, like holding that view for all people. That for me became something that I was like constantly wanting to touch base with, exercising my
Mhm.
my compassion to that degree. Being able to see if I could walk down the street and see what we have internalized and been indoctrinated and conditioned to see as someone who's an addict. Like you see a homeless person in the street drinking out of a brown paper bag, and we say, I'm not an addict. I don't have a problem with drugs and alcohol because I'm not homeless on the street doing that, and releasing that view and recognize that this person is basically good, has this basic goodness at the base of their being. They are innately good, and they also hold the same potential that you and I have to be
Mhm.
free and to be utterly joyous, and holding to that, working on that view as you enter the streets, as you enter the supermarket, as you are engaging with any being, continuously reminding yourself of that. It's profound what takes place inside of you. You surprise yourself, and then you learn that you can actually rely on yourself because you've been exercising your best qualities so much.
That's true. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's a challenging time right now to, like, how have you been working with the US politics, the election, the eruption of Black Lives Matter? How has that been for you?
It's been extremely challenging, to be honest, and extremely challenging. And I also, just before I move on, I just wanted to say one point, that you came out in the 70s, and for you, the only way to meet fellow queer people was in the bars. It's still kind of that here as well in Los Angeles. And I
Mm.
and I said to Tammy off the record, I was like, I'm having. Part of it was on the record. I'm having a hard time dating,
Mhm.
because it's not that I have this high list of all these prerequisites, but I'm really wanting to connect with people who have similar dreams that I do, who are not wanting to get drunk and high because they can't have an uncomfortable conversation, or they can't deal with their depression and anxiety without being intoxicated.
Yeah.
It's been challenging. It's been very challenging, like to say the least, but choosing to remain sober, choosing to be obedient and devotionally obedient to my practice and to my freedom has given me the ground to sort of continue and stay open and not close off. Anytime I'm going to close off, I notice that my body is closing off, that my jaw becomes tight, my fists close. I start blinking really fast. I started to, there's all these like sort of anxious tics that play out. But then I notice that, and I take a deep breath and I whisper a mantra in my mind, and I, do my best effort to remain open. So I just wanted to touch base on that, to just say that this is an actual reality still. I think we have a lot of work to do before we can actually be in a world that we're not saying happy hours where you're going to find happiness. It's so flawed. It's so flawed. It's so
well, and
flawed.
also when, there's been so much social change around gay people, for sure. Like, I was in a long-term relationship. There was no marriage at that time,
Yeah.
It was just, really out there. And, I was out to my family, but a lot of people weren't. They had the extra bedroom, and when your parents came to visit, you moved your lover's stuff into your other bedroom so that nobody would know. It was like there was all this hiding, and even now when I think about young queer kids, a lot of kids are really open to it, but some of the parents still aren't. Kids are still getting kicked out, and it's just such a shame that we have that that kind of feeling like there must be something wrong with us.
Yeah. And I pray and I continue to show up full power, radically authentic every day on the internet for that reason, because I do want to remind people that you being your truth is a blessing. You being your truth is really what's going to help to us all to uncover our benevolence, uncover our best qualities. Stop pretending that you stop pretending, for people, because we're seeking ways of feeling of receiving and receiving love and belonging. Like the more authentic you are, that's how you're genuinely going to find delicious, fulfilling connections in your life. People are going to really welcome you into you're really going to feel like you belong anywhere because you're so at home in your body, you're so at home within yourself. So I just wanted to pivot to say that, because I feel like for everyone listening, I think it's really important to recognize that for us to validate the difficulty of being queer and sober and on the spiritual journey, on the healing journey, that this is still a curriculum that we are working towards, a very heavy one. But I applaud everybody for trying. I applaud everybody for taking one day at a time on their sober journey. And then to answer your question about the Black Lives Matter movement and COVID, and election, it's been extremely heavy here. And like, I'm constantly checking in the stats of like suicide hotlines to see how people are doing. And I'm reading about it in the States and what's happening in the UK. And it's been so alarming, 600% more calls into the suicide hotlines than ever because of COVID. Like, can you imagine 600%? It shatters my heart just thinking about that, And then you look at the amount of the alcohol consumption has gone up 70%, sales. It's wild. We have not been given the tools to cope and transform and heal. We've been told, have a drink, do this thing, and you're going to feel better. And that is just so flawed. It's created a society, a sick society, how we have now, So it's been difficult. And I've taken a really radical stand to not speak about, voting enormous necessity, calling the people who are writing the legislations and doing all these political systemic changes radically necessary, extremely necessary. But I realize my lane, my way. What can I do within this space is to remind people that we can have the most iconic laws that it equalizes us all, that makes us all feel like we belong and that we're worthy. But if the people operating under these laws are still mentally sick, we're going to have another movement eruption in just a few years. We're going to have another whole thing happen like this in not too long ago. And so I've taken a big stand to just say over and over again, it's like, yes, go vote. Yes, go protest. Yes, go do all the things. But remember that if you're still having a layer of judgment passing by your mind when you see a Black, brown, or queer person, you're part of the problem. You may not be the ones who are killing us, who are throwing rocks at us, who are talking, saying unkind things to us on the street. But if those thoughts are visiting your mind and you're not doing something in the very moment to eradicate these thoughts from your mind, to introduce a new style of thinking, you're part of the problem. So I've just been constantly speaking to that over and over again, and all the ways for us to really sit with our mind and really use what we see out there as challenges as opportunities for us to get to know our mind more fully, and then truly uncover our hearts in the process. But it's been an enormous hike to just keep reminding people of that and keep standing up for what feels the most truthful and authentic for my lane and what I could offer to the space.
Right.
And then people always, during this process, I was saying to people, I'm putting Donald Trump in my altar. He is the guru today. And people will feel so triggered and so wobbly about that. I'm working on having enormous compassion for someone who's in deep pain. I'm working on recognizing their benevolence and their goodness, regardless if this person is really putting out so much unkindness into the world. That's the part of me being obedient and devotional to my personal transformation, is working with these very difficult people in our lives, and someone who's making the lives of millions of people very difficult. So it's been interesting, COVID, it's been extremely difficult for me to have to, be inside. I thrive in community. As you know, I dance pretty frequently, and being in community to dance has been an enormous part of my healing. Yeah. And I dance in sober spaces only. So we're dancing with the intention to heal, with the intention to transform. So COVID has been really difficult for that. I think the Black Lives Matter movement has brought up a fire within me to tell people, look at your mind radically. You have homophobic, racist thoughts. We all do, unless we truly have looked in our minds. We are indoctrinated with them. And then with the election, really just working with this radically challenging person as the object of focus to transform our minds and open up to the truth of who we are. And it's funny because when Joe Biden and Kamala Harris won the election last weekend, I was in silence. I had taken a vow of silence for the weekend, so I was observing silence. Yeah. So I'm down here, in full practice, doing my purification practice, and I'm hearing my neighbors screaming, and I'm like, oh my God, what happened? What's going on? But noticing my mind orienting to that excitement and the agitation of that was taking place right across the street from me. And then just coming back to my practice. And I only lifted the silence at sundown on Sunday to then realize, oh, honey, they won. So it was a really interesting thing to just navigate that, craving. I need to know now what's going to happen, and to just relax into and radical acceptance and accept what is. It's going to be fine for the highest good of all. The highest good of all will prevail. I
think it's really sad, a lot of what we see when people are ridiculing him and making fun of him, and it's so isolating and disconnecting. So to do a practice of trying to see the humanity in someone who's causing harm is a really advanced practice. Yeah, it really is. So you talk in your book about redesigning the mind.
Yes.
I want to talk a little bit about, so what if someone's really caught up in all of this? Lots of catastrophic thoughts, lots of anger. What are some ways that people could start to soften around that?
Great question. I think first things first is what I call a spiritual inventory of the mind. And using the word spiritual inventory, that means what? That you're approaching the mind with tenderness, with sweetness, with kindness. I could just say, take inventory of your mind, and we'll just have this kind of rigid, let me take inventory of your mind. But saying spiritual inventory, it immediately requires you to enter a place of softness, a place of tenderness, a place of sweetness. And what you do in that space, you're going to take inventory of your mind. Is your mind mostly orienting towards catastrophizing the future? Are you constantly in this worst case scenario mindset? or are you constantly ruminating and overthinking the past? That was my predicament. That was my curriculum, is constantly overplaying the past, constantly ruminating the past. And we know that when we're ruminating the past a lot, we're more prone for depression and ruminate and catastrophizers and future trippers. It's more oriented towards anxiety. And in that space in between, it's addiction, So it's really a challenging thing to do, but also so necessary. So taking inventory of the mind is seeing, like, where is your mind orienting towards mostly? Throughout the day, are you constantly orienting towards the future or towards the past, or you're really orienting towards this, like, self-loathing, constantly anger at yourself, never being able to touch base with your benevolence, never being able to give yourself a compliment, never being able to tell yourself the things that you tell your best friend or that you tell your lover. So taking and being really honest about it and actually writing it down. Redesigning the mind takes you to first accept what your mind is like now. What is the garden of your mind like now? So you're entering the garden of your mind, with the spiritual gloves, with the spiritual gardening gloves, but being honest about, like, oh wow, I've done a tremendous job at cultivating all these seeds of depression, of addiction, of anxiety, of harm, of self-harm, of gossiping, of complaining, in a variety of envy, of jealousy, of hatred, all the seeds. And I've done an enormous job at cultivating all these seeds, intentionally or unintentionally, right? Recognizing that we do that. And then being honest about it, accepting that, and then having a practice of forgiveness. Wow, I forgive myself for all the ways I've harmed myself, for all the ways I've muted myself, all the ways that I've silenced myself and caused myself deep, profound harm. And because of that harm, then I cause harm to other people. And then asking for forgiveness of other people. And then forgiving the people who we've together co-created such challenging trauma that our minds have been habituated to more pain. Does that make sense?
No, it does. Yeah.
So then it's a process of first inventory, then accept what you see, and then a process of forgiveness. And in the process of acceptance and forgiveness, magic is already taking place. You're actually going to the garden of your mind, and you're simultaneously, with both of your spiritual gardening gloves in your hands, you're weeding out the seeds of suffering, and you're watering the seeds of compassion, the seeds of benevolence, the seeds of wisdom. Simultaneously, this is taking place. You're given the seeds that are directly connected to the base of your being, to your heart, enough water, enough sunlight. Because we've done a fantastic job at watering all these other seeds that are keeping us stuck, perpetuating suffering. And after you've done the inventory, acceptance, forgiveness practice, it won't happen once. You have to continue. It's a very beautiful, sensitive practice and an art. Tending to the mind is an art. We get better at it every day. And then after you do this, then what you can do, what I would highly recommend as you continue to do this practice, is concentration of mind. Like choosing to have a practice of concentration of your mind where you're actually able to witness the impulses and the tendencies of your mind. Instead of getting caught up in them, you're able to just be with them and not become them. You're now able to look at the sky and recognize that a dark cloud doesn't define the essence of the sky, doesn't define the quality of the sky itself. It's part of it, but it doesn't define its essence, doesn't define its beauty. And so concentration of mind will support you with that awareness, the thoughts, feelings, and emotions, and all the unprocessed stuff, and all the things that are creating these impulses for us to reach for the bottle and reach for the drugs and alcohol, and all the impulses that are creating more suffering in our lives. We're able to have just a little bit of space. And that spacious awareness has these 4 innate qualities that I talk about all the time. In Buddhist psychology, it's called the Brahma Viharas, right? It's loving, it's compassionate, it's wise, and it's joyful. I twisted a little bit to make it more easier for the Western ear to understand. Right. But it leads to the same. It leads to the same sort of innate quality. So that spacious awareness, you're being spacious around your impulses, you're already cultivating your best qualities. So concentration of the mind is foundation. Every day, try to do one thing at a time. If meditating with your eyes closed, it's too overwhelming because you have a lot of unprocessed trauma and there's such dense depressive energy in your body and such agitated, anxious energy in your body. You might just want to do one thing at a time, and that's your meditation, my love. Wash the dishes and being like, I'm washing dishes. Brushing my teeth, I'm brushing my teeth. Cleaning the house, I'm cleaning the house. Let that be your meditation. But notice when your mind leaves the present moment and goes into future tripping or past tripping, and just orient it back to the now. So this concentration of mind it will slowly develop your best qualities. You're going to be able to feel safe in the now, and that
Mm.
safety in the now that is always here and radically available, abundantly available for us, will help us to make peace with the past. It will help us to not be worried about the future. Cultivation of safety is necessary for healing addiction. Cultivation of safety is necessary to make peace with our past, with the worries about the future. And the only way to touch base with that safety is in the present moment. It's in the
Yeah.
now. And then one other practice that I would massively recommend is relearning how to breathe. Relearning
Mhm.
how to breathe. Like really knowing that the breath is a incredibly massive tool. And we know through research that an anxious or depressed person is breathing anywhere from 12 to 16 times per minute. So the
Yeah.
breath is very shallow, very clavicular, very up here. And when we are in a process of recovery and transformation and healing, relearning how to breathe to the third part of the lungs, which will technically look like a belly breath. It will feel
Mhm.
like you're actually able. It will feel like you're actually able to breathe all the way to the bottom of your belly, but we are just breathing to the third part of our lungs, which is the abdominal area. So relearn how to breathe, and the breath that I invite us all to do is a breath that's like 4 to 6 times per minute. So it's very deep, it's very long, and just taking time every day to, and knowing that each time you take this breath, you're doing what I said earlier, that you're going to the garden of your mind and you're reading out the seeds of suffering, you're watering the seeds of freedom. And you have to have, it's a devotional belief that that's possible. It requires a level of like critical analysis. Oh, is this working? Okay, cool. And as soon as as soon as you feel that there is a progress a little bit, but then within that critical analysis that you're progressing, you're healing, you're feeling better, then have a little bit of trust, the more than you can ever imagine, or that it meets the eye, is taking place inside of you. Taking
Mhm.
refuge in that is what set me free to where I'm at today. You know what I mean?
So how did you get to that? So you start off with this feeling like there's something kind of wrong with you. You're starting to be introduced to basic goodness, and it's like,
Yeah.
whoa, okay.
Yeah.
And then you're working with your mind.
Hmm.
And so people are often so afraid to go into the body, and even breathing like that can feel quite threatening.
Hmm.
So, how did you move from kind of all the things you were doing to this groundedness and this feeling like it's safe to be you?
Yeah, I mean, thank you for this beautiful question and for this beautiful reflection. A friend of mine reflected back to me. He's like, Sah, it's taken out a lot of work for you to be this effortless. And I'm like, that's
That's awesome.
that is so true. That is
Yeah.
so true. And it's a moment to moment awareness, like moment to moment. In the literature, it says that we have 64 moments of choice with every blink of an eye, right? We're just not aware of this amount of choices that are actually taking place. They're actually creating our future. But it's turning life into a ritual. It's waking up in the morning and recognizing our mortality. I say a prayer in the morning. I won't go into the entire thing, but just in short, what it actually says, it's like, I know that I may die today, and because of that, may I only do the things that are most beneficial to me, and may these things be extremely and radically benevolent and beneficial to all people everywhere. So that kind of orients your mind, orients your day, and
Mhm.
then I'll sit down to meditate, or sometimes I'll read a book before I meditate. And then I do a set of mantras based on my lineage. That, there's mantras for wisdom, for compassion, for power, for trust, and then I'll either go off on a run. Running has been tremendously necessary for my path, for my healing path, and then I'll dance. And I think a big piece to the spiritually sassy movement and messaging is feeling sex in your body, like reconnecting to sensuality, like really being embodied in the practice. So the dance practice isn't like an intellectual healing practice. It's deeply actualizing. It requires you to actually gather your attention into your body and your intention to be free. Attention and intention coming together while you're moving your body in a really sensual and sexy way. Miracles take place inside of you,
Mm-hmm.
and the truth of it is my love, is that it requires a continuous practice. It just requires us to do the work every day. Like, people look at my social media, and sometimes people will read the captions or will be very moved by the work, and some people are just kind of caught with the surface aspect of the work. Um, but people think that because I say out into the world that I'm a joy activist, that it means that I'm always happy, that it means that I never go through low periods, that it means that I never am feeling lonely or craving or thinking I'm missing out because I'm sober. No, that's not true at all. It's not true at all. Like, these kinds of thoughts still surface my mind. They're just not as prevalent anymore. The texture and the stickiness, they're not as sticky anymore. Like, my mind is a little bit more silky, it's a little bit more velvety, you know what I mean? It's not so much like the Velcro anymore. It's not so much like, oh, this came up, I am that, I'll speak to that, I'll act on that. I don't have that kind of it's not as sticky anymore. And I think that's the choosing to concentrate the mind, choosing to laugh every day, choosing to dance every day, choosing to stop watching such poor TV and such poor podcasts and music, because we know through the natural law of karma that everything's imprinting the mind. Nothing goes unseen. If you're working on your sober journey and you're constantly watching people getting drunk and high, what do you think you're orienting your mind towards? More craving of that.
Yeah.
So when I decided to radically change my life, right? And I was doing all this selfishly just for me. I wanted to feel better. I was never thinking that I was going to step into this role and write and do this thing at the scale that I'm doing. It was never the plan. I cut off all the things, that were orienting my mind towards more suicidal thoughts, more anger, more hatred, more addiction tendencies. And it requires a lot of courage. So if you're listening to this and you're thinking about doing it, I applaud you so much, because it takes enormous courage to say, I don't want to talk about this and I don't want to watch this. I'm working on my transformation. And when we're doing the work in the mind and to be where I'm at today, you have to come out of the spiritual closet. And we talked about coming out of the queer closet, but I'm now talking about the spiritual closet, which it means you have to recognize that the most important thing you can offer yourself and the world is the liberation of your heart, is your internal freedom, is a relaxed nervous system, is a kind mind, because we are deeply interconnected and deeply interdependent. So when you enter the supermarket and you are feeling relaxed, you're impacting the grid system that we're all connected to. I felt many times in the presence of these radical saints that I've sat with in India and Nepal. It could seem a little bit jarring for some of us in the West, but it's the truth. It's almost like the temperature changes. The air is more cooling. It's just literally the time sort of stop. You can actually see the flowers and the trees kind of like dancing in a harmonious way, like the way the sunlight hits this person's hands. There's a dreamlike quality to everything, and that's the steps that I take towards every day, is being able to enter the world as I call it in the book, a blessing factory, as I spoke to Tammy about. It's really being someone who's being of benefit to everyone at all times. And when I'm not, I'm radically aware of that. And when I'm not, I'm radically aware of that. And I know the antidote. That is, I think, what we are working towards is that, but it's moment to moment, right? Day by day. I have one of my private students. I don't see as many private students as I used to in the past, because now we have the app, we have the book, we have the social media. There's all these things we're doing. But I have one private student who, in the last 8 months, has become completely sober and has gone off all of the antidepressant and anti-anxiety medication. Like, it makes me so emotional to even say this out loud, because it's through these practices, right? I'm washing the dishes, I'm painting, connecting to people who remind you of your benevolence, who remind you of your goodness, the Supreme Assembly, the Buddha speaks to this in detail, the Sangha, right? Taking refuge on the Sangha. And then taking refuge that you have the seed of enlightenment at the base of your being, and then taking refuge that on the practices and the teachings and the knowledge that will set you free, that will help you to remember that. But while doing, remembering that you have the seed of enlightenment and doing the practices, taking refuge in a community. There's so much research into the addiction space about the lack of community leads us to seek out drugs and alcohol. So remember that. I mean, the Buddha, I'm sure he was not even aware of how the enormous extent of drugs and alcohol and addiction that were going to come forward after his passing. But he sort of knew the importance of the necessary piece to the healing, meaning the Supreme Assembly that we say, but it's the community, the spiritual community. And what I'm saying about all this is coming out of the spiritual closet is recognizing that is the most important thing we can offer ourselves in the world is a relaxed nervous system and a compassionate and kind mind, and good actions. So that's like that.
So tell us a little bit about your app and your book. And so how is it you work with people? You have a membership on the app?
Yeah. So the app has three levels, has 3 tiers. The free, which gives you access to the community. It's just like an amazing, oh my God, it warms my heart every day to just see everyone celebrating each other's wins. And I have these prompts that go out there. What's your weekly intention? We're celebrating each other's sober journey. We're holding each other accountable. And so it's so beautiful. So the free tier offers you, the community offers you access to 6 meditations. And these 6 are one of the most, they're the most, the ones that most people have enjoyed in all these different places that my work has been shown. And then you're going to have access to the podcast, which we're launching next week.
Oh, good.
Yeah. So I'm so excited about that. And then the gold membership gives you access to my entire library of all the courses, meditations, master classes, Sah method, all the things that this very large library of stuff. That's the gold, plus 1 new meditation a month and 1 new master class a month. And then the platinum is all of that, plus an intimate spiritual group coaching session every month. So that's the app. It's called Spiritually Sassy School, for people who are wanting to transform their minds and open their hearts in an avant-garde way, who are looking for dismantling this view that to be on a spiritual path, you have to have this zombie zen or this forced seriousness, which I spoke in detail with Tammy from Sounds True about that. And I think that's why the book is doing so well, for that reason, because a lot of people are wanting a spiritual practice that doesn't say you should talk like this, you should walk like that, you should eat like this, you should dress like this. People are tired of that. It's like, be truly who you radically are at the base of your being. Not the you think you are, not the you feel you are, the one that it's underneath that, the you, the capital Y, that one that it's all knowing, that thoughts and feelings and emotions can't even begin to reference, because it's so vast and so wild and so incredible and so fabulous, so iconic and legendary, that you that I'm speaking about, And then the new book called Spiritually Sassy. And It's out now, and it's 8 Radical Steps to Activate Your Innate Superpowers. And I invite everybody to check out the book and see if that's of support to you. And yeah, that's kind of the full picture a little bit.
So one thing that you said when you were talking about forgiveness and connecting with yourself was, I forgive myself for muting myself. So I'm just curious, like when you were 14 years old and 21 years old and all of these times, could you have ever imagined that this was what your life was going to be like?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Like the idea that I would actually like transform myself in such a way that then I would be able to like share what I've learned with other people. Never could have ever. I would have actually said to you, honey, put the pipe down because you're on crack, because you're telling me this, you know what I mean? I would actually be like, honey, I think you need help because like, how could you see me step into this role, you know? And the funny thing is, it's like, you know, the truth of it, it's like there have been a few very powerful radical saints along my journey who said to me, you're going to teach, you're going to do this. And I was like, no, I'm not. I'm in it for myself. I'm in it. This is for me. Little did I know that was like what was there, and what was actually like was going to set me free was helping people. And that's also an important part that I don't want to leave out. It's like service. You know, I got out of one of the biggest depressions of my life, one that I didn't think I could actually get through because the suicidal thoughts were so prevalent and the cravings were so intense. But it was actually being of service. It was actually not having a lot of money and not having a lot to give, but just enough that I would actually put myself in these places and just not say a word, but just share sandwiches. At some point it was McDonald's because I could only buy 20 cheeseburgers, and I would bring them to the park, to this park where these people would be dropped off after they were coming off of a correctional facility. You're left there with nowhere to go, like lost, and we just leave them there, kind of like, go do your thing now, so I would bring sandwiches to them. And that really transformed my mind and really opened my heart and really reminded me of the potential that we all have to be kinder to each other, to think about the well-being of each other. So like that.
Wow. If someone is listening who's just like, okay, well, that's okay for him. I mean, look at the guy. He's got all this joy and freedom and all of that. So do you believe that everybody can heal? Do you believe everybody can do this?
Absolutely 100%. My love, when I'm telling you that I've had such low lows of depression, suicidal thoughts, so many of them, and I was so deeply connected to my addiction to such a degree that I never thought I could actually be free. To be where I'm at today and have mostly good and happy moments, it's quite wild to think about it like that,
It is,
and there is research that shows that no trauma is too big that can't be healed.
Right.
No trauma is too big that can't be healed. And really, really honestly, and what I'm talking about, the forgiveness part, I'm just going to say this one last part. I'm not asking you to go up to the person that has harmed you, that you have harmed, and actually tell it to their face. No, I'm not saying that. I'm talking about a forgiveness. In the book, I speak to this. Forgiveness being a very independent process. So between you, and really at some point you recognize that you were doing your best, and that person was doing their best, regardless of how traumatic and challenging it was. But forgiving yourself for what you have done towards yourself and what you've done to other people, like finding connecting to the power of second chances, connecting to the power of that potential that we all have, like, and if you're listening to this, let this be your sign that like you can do this. And it is radically available to all of us. I would never step into this role to teach something that was only for a privileged few.
Right.
Never, ever would I put myself in this role to speak this loud and have so many people listening if it was for a privileged few, if it costs this much, and if it was only for this skin type, or for only for this orientation, for only this kind of trauma, I would never do it.
Yeah.
I'm telling you that it's possible. But what it requires is the deep, deep, deep devotional obedience to your freedom. Do one day. Say, today I'm going to try this, and then see what the next day is like. Things get wobbly, things get crunchy. Call a friend. I had my sister throughout this whole process. I told you I didn't seek out professional help because I had my sister. And her
Yeah.
nervous system was so calibrated and so relaxed that she didn't ask anything of me. She just sat there at breakfast, like legit. She knew that I was so tormented, that my demons were so activated. She did nothing. She just literally would make me a toast and a coffee. She'd just sit there next to me, not even engaging with eye contact, because when you're in that low place, eye contact can feel so threatening, so difficult to engage with.
Yeah.
She did nothing. She just sat there. Her presence helped me tremendously to remind myself to remember that I can do this. So who's that person in your life? Let them know. Let them know. Keep in contact in that way.
How can people get a hold of you?
Oh, thank you, love. On Instagram at Sah D'Simone, SahDsimone. And then look up Spiritually Sassy School and join us on the app. And I would love to see you around, and we'd love to celebrate your sober journey. We have many people there who are day 8 or month 9, and so we're really supporting that that kind of conducive healing place for everybody. So join us in all the places, and let me know how it's going.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. This has been great talking with you. And I know people will be really interested in hearing what you're saying, and who you are really comes through. So thank you for sharing that with us.
Oh, thank you so much.